neon blue flashes, sirens blaring in the distance. Amina's hands pressed desperately against his chest, slick with blood, trembling as though the world itself were shaking beneath her. She leaned closer, pressing harder on the wound that refused to close, her tears mingling with the iron scent in the air. "Jae-Hyun, stay with me, please," she whispered, voice breaking. "You can't. Not now, you promised." He coughed, his body trembling, yet the faintest smirk tugged at his lips. "Didn't I tell you? You can't escape me that easily?" His voice was hoarse, ragged, but there was a teasing edge that made her heart stutter. "You idiot. Just live. Please," she cried, pressing harder, willing herself to stop panicking. His fingers twitched against her wrist, weak but deliberate, a small gesture that contradicted the danger radiating from him. The world was chaos, shouts, sirens, gunfire in the distance, but for her, it narrowed to just him. His breathing was shallow, uneven, but his eyes flickered with that same dangerous intelligence she had glimpsed weeks before. Please like and subscribe for more videos. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet exhaustion. Amina tucked her pen into her pocket, glancing at the admission board. Another gunshot victim, male, unconscious, no identification. She exhaled slowly and headed toward the emergency bay, mentally preparing for another long night. When he was wheeled in, she paused instinctively. Even unconscious, he looked composed, calm in a way that was impossible for someone who had nearly bled out. Dark hair clung to his forehead, sharp features relaxed only slightly beneath the bruises and blood. "Gunshot to the abdomen," a doctor said. "No ID, unconscious." Amina nodded, voice steady. "Room 307. I'll take the intake." Hours later, she checked his vitals. His eyes opened slowly, dark and assessing, meeting hers with a sharp intensity. "Where am I?" "St. Clair's Hospital," she said evenly. "You were shot. You need to rest." "And you are?" he asked, voice clipped, carrying authority even in weakness. "Amina." "Your nurse," she replied. He studied her silently, a faint shadow of amusement flickering before his eyes went cold again. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I'm literally supposed to be here." "That's my job," she replied, voice firm. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned his gaze to the ceiling, distant, calculating, unreadable. He was cold, curt, almost impossible to read, and yet she noticed how he seemed to observe every detail of her movements, testing boundaries without touching. Days passed. Their interactions were minimal but charged. He tolerated her presence, allowed her to check his vitals without complaint, let her adjust his bandages, but he said nothing more than necessary. His silence was a wall she couldn't breach, yet every so often, a flicker of attention, a subtle glance, hinted at the man beneath the armor. She began to notice it, the way he lingered just long enough to see her reaction, the way he didn't pull away when her hand brushed his, the faint, almost imperceptible softening in his eyes when she spoke calmly to him. On the fourth day, Amina brought him his medication and found him staring out the window, jaw tight with frustration. The late afternoon sun cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles and the tension he carried even in stillness. "You need to take these," she said, holding out the pills. He glanced at them, then back at the window. "What's the point?" "The point is healing," she replied, moving closer. "That's literally what we do here." "Some things don't heal," he said quietly, voice carrying an edge of something darker. Amina set the pills on the bedside table and sat down in the chair beside him, uninvited. "You're right. Some things don't. But infections? Blood loss? Those absolutely will kill you if you don't take care of them." He turned his head slowly, dark eyes meeting hers with that penetrating intensity that made her pulse quicken. For a moment, neither spoke. Then his lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close enough to make her breath catch. "You're stubborn," he observed. "Says the man who tried to discharge himself twice yesterday," she shot back. This time, he did smile, small, fleeting, but genuine. He took the pills from the table and swallowed them without breaking eye contact. "Satisfied?" "For now," she replied, standing. But as she turned to leave, His voice stopped her. Amina. She looked back, surprised he'd used her name. Thank you, he said simply. The words were quiet, almost reluctant, but they carried weight. She nodded, throat tight, and left the room with her heart beating faster than it should. One evening, as she adjusted his fore, he looked at her, dark eyes meeting hers. You talk too much, he said softly. I'm just doing my job, she replied, flustered. Maybe, he murmured, voice low, almost teasing. But it's hard to ignore. She froze, chest tightening. That single phrase carried an intimacy he had not allowed before. He turned back to the ceiling, but the air between them had shifted, taut with something neither of them named yet. The next day, Amina arrived for her shift to find Jae-Hyun sitting up in bed, fully alert, reading something on a phone that definitely wasn't hospital-issued. His expression was cold, focused, the warmth from the previous evening completely absent. Where did you get that? She asked, nodding toward the phone. Does it matter? He replied without looking up. Hospital policy. I don't care about hospital policy, he interrupted, finally meeting her gaze. The coldness in his eyes sent a chill down her spine. This was a different man, harder, more dangerous. Who are you? She asked quietly. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he set the phone down and studied her with that same calculating intensity. Someone you should stay away from. Too late for that, she replied, moving closer to check his vitals despite the warning in his tone. You're my patient. His hand shot out, catching her wrist, not painfully, but firmly. She gasped, eyes widening as she met his gaze. The touch was electric, sending heat racing up her arm. I'm serious, Amina, he said, voice low and intense. You don't want to be involved in my life. Then why are you still here? She challenged, refusing to pull away. You could have left days ago. You have the resources, clearly. So why stay? His jaw tightened, and for the first time, she saw genuine conflict flash across his features. His thumb brushed against her pulse point, whether intentionally or not, she couldn't tell, and his eyes darkened. Because, he said finally, releasing her wrist, leaving would be complicated right now. She didn't press further, but the admission hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. As she finished her examination, she was acutely aware of his eyes following her every movement, tracking her with the precision of someone who noticed everything. The turning point came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Amina was finishing her rounds when she heard raised voices coming from Jae-Hyun's room. Her stomach dropped as she hurried toward the sound. Two men in expensive suits stood just inside the doorway, speaking rapidly in Korean. Jae-Hyun was on his feet, against medical advice, his posture rigid and defensive despite the obvious pain the movement caused him. I said leave. Jae-Hyun's voice cut through the air like a blade, cold and commanding in a way she'd never heard before. One of the men spotted Amina in the doorway. Who is she? None of your concern, Jae-Hyun replied, switching to English. His eyes flicked to her, and something softened for just a fraction of a second before the cold mask returned. Nurse, these gentlemen were just leaving. Hyungnim, the second man said, voice urgent and pleading. You can't just disappear. The family needs. I don't care what the family needs, Jae-Hyun interrupted, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Tell them I'm handling it. The first man's eyes narrowed. Chairman Park won't accept. Then Chairman Park can come tell me himself, Jae-Hyun said, the threat implicit in his tone. The tension in the room was suffocating. Amina found herself stepping forward before she could think better of it. Gentlemen, visiting hours are over and my patient needs rest. You'll have to continue this conversation another time. All three men turned to look at her, the suited men with surprise, Jae-Hyun with something that might have been approval mixed with concern. The first man studied her for a long moment, then said something in Korean to Jae-Hyun that made his expression darken dangerously. Whatever it was, it made Jae-Hyun take a step forward despite his injury, his entire bearing screaming threat. Out. Now, Jae-Hyun said, voice deadly quiet. The men exchanged glances, then bowed slightly, a gesture that seemed equal parts respect and resignation, and left. The moment they were gone, Jae-Hyun swayed, and Amina was there instantly, supporting him. You shouldn't be on your feet, she scolded, helping him back to the bed. "I'm fine," he muttered, but he didn't resist her assistance. "You're bleeding through your bandage," she countered, already reaching for fresh supplies. "What was that about?" "Nothing you need to worry about." She paused in her work, meeting his eyes directly. "Jae-Hyun, those men were scared of you. And based on what I just saw, maybe they should be. But I'm not scared, and I'm not going anywhere, so you might as well tell me the truth." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Finally, he sighed. "My family runs certain businesses in Seoul. The legitimate kind on paper, anyway. And the not-so-legitimate kind in reality," she asked quietly, hands steady as she cleaned and redressed his wound. "Sometimes," he admitted. "I've been trying to change that. To make things cleaner. Some people in the organization aren't happy about it." "Is that why you were shot?" His silence was answer enough. Amina finished securing the bandage and sat back, processing. She should be terrified. Should be calling security, or the police, or running as far away as possible. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why tell me this?" "Because," he said quietly, reaching out to catch her hand, his touch gentle despite the calluses she could feel on his palm, "you were going to figure it out eventually. And I'd rather you hear it from me than from them." "What did that man say to you?" "In Korean, before you got angry." Jae-Hyun's jaw tightened. "He suggested I should be more careful about who I let get close to me. That it could be dangerous for them." "Was that a threat?" "A warning," he corrected, thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that seemed almost unconscious. "One I should have heeded weeks ago." But he didn't let go of her hand, and she didn't pull away. They sat there in the quiet of the hospital room, the weight of unspoken words and dangerous truths settling between them like a promise neither was ready to make, but both were unwilling to break. Weeks of tension, small gestures, and unspoken challenges built slowly. He allowed her to sit near him while he rested, occasionally letting a smile slip when she scolded him lightly for trying to move too soon. She observed the fleeting warmth in his gaze when she laughed, or when she fussed over the small comfort of his room. But now, everything was different. The truth sat between them, acknowledged but not fully explored. Amina found herself more cautious, more aware of the danger, yet simultaneously drawn closer to him. There was something compelling about the contradiction he embodied, the cold, calculating leader and the man who softened when she entered the room. One afternoon, she brought him lunch from the cafeteria and found him on his phone again, speaking rapid Korean with someone who was clearly arguing with him. He caught sight of her and held up one finger, asking for a moment. He said sharply into the phone she'd picked up enough Korean from him to know it meant something like, "We're done," and ended the call. "Business?" she asked, setting down the tray. "Unfortunately," he replied, eyeing the hospital food with barely concealed distaste. She laughed. "I know it's not great, but you need to eat. Is that your professional opinion?" "It's common sense," she countered, sitting in the chair beside his bed that had become her usual spot. "Which apparently you're in short supply of, considering you keep taking calls that make your blood pressure spike." He raised an eyebrow. "You can tell my blood pressure from across the room now?" "Your jaw does this thing when you're stressed," she said, gesturing vaguely at his face. "It gets all tight and—" She trailed off, suddenly aware that she'd been staring at him enough to notice these small details. Heat crept up her neck. Jae-Hyun's lips curved into that rare, genuine smile that made her heart stutter. "Does it now?" "Eat your food," she said quickly, standing. "Stay," he said, the single word stopping her mid-step. When she turned back, his expression had sobered. "Please." She sat back down, and they fell into comfortable conversation, or as comfortable as it could be, given everything between them. He told her about Seoul, about the parts of the city tourists never saw, about late-night street food and the Han River at dawn. She told him about growing up in Chicago, about her family's initial confusion when she said she wanted to be a nurse, about the small apartment she shared with her best friend who was never actually there because she worked night shifts too. "Do you miss it?" he asked. "Korea, I mean." "You've never been, but the way I describe it." "Maybe someday," she said softly. "Though I imagine your soul is very different from the one most people see." "It is," he admitted. "But I could show you both." the glittering city and the one beneath it. If he trailed off, something uncertain crossing his features. If what? She prompted. If things were different, he finished quietly. The weight of those words settled between them, an acknowledgement of what they both felt and all the reasons it was impossible. And then came the moment that would bind them. A minor fall in the hallway as he attempted to test his strength. Nothing serious, but enough to make her panic. She caught him instantly, chest pressed to his, heart hammering in fear and frustration. "You're impossible," she said, voice shaking, but steadying him firmly. He started, then stopped, jaw tightening. He allowed her to steady him, leaning just slightly into her hold, a rare concession to vulnerability. You care too much," he murmured under her breath, almost inaudibly, yet she heard it. Her cheeks warmed, but she said nothing. They stood there in the empty hallway, his weight against her, her arms around him, and something shifted irrevocably between them. When he finally pulled back enough to meet her eyes, the look on his face made her breath catch raw, unguarded, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. "Amina," he said quietly, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, the touch feather-light and devastatingly gentle. "You should walk away. Right now. Before this becomes something neither of us can take back." "And if I don't want to," she whispered. "Then we're both fools," he replied, but he was leaning closer, his forehead coming to rest against hers in a gesture that felt more intimate than any kiss. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, balanced on the edge of something that terrified and exhilarated them both. Then footsteps echoed down the corridor, and they sprang apart, the spell broken but not forgotten. From that moment, the barriers he had built began to erode, gradually, quietly, the cold walls giving way to trust and tentative affection. He tested her with small remarks, teasing comments, subtle challenges, and she responded in kind, calm, steady, unafraid, gradually earning glimpses of the warmth beneath the danger. 3 weeks after his admission, Jae-Hyun was medically cleared to leave. Amina had known this day was coming, had prepared herself for it, but actually facing his departure felt like a physical blow. She found him in his room, already dressed in clothes that had been delivered that morning, expensive, perfectly tailored, making him look every inch the powerful man he actually was rather than the patient she'd been caring for. "So this is it," she said from the doorway, trying to keep her voice light. He turned, and the look on his face was complicated relief, regret, something that looked almost like pain. "I have a car waiting." "Of course you do," she replied, stepping into the room. "I just wanted to say goodbye. And make sure you actually follow up with your doctor." "I will," he promised, moving closer. They stood there, the space between them charged with everything unspoken. "Jae-Hyun, come with me," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. At her shocked expression, he continued, "Not permanently." "Not yet. But let me take you to dinner. Tomorrow night. Somewhere normal, where we can just talk. Without all of this." He gestured at the hospital room around them. "Is that safe?" she asked quietly. "For either of us?" "Probably not," he admitted with a wry smile. "But I'm tired of safe. I want to know you, Amina. The real you outside these walls. If you'll let me." She should say no. Should let him walk out of her life and back into his dangerous world without looking back. Should protect herself from the inevitable heartbreak of falling for a man whose life was built on secrets and violence. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Okay, tomorrow night." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, warm, genuine, transforming him into someone younger and infinitely more dangerous to her heart. He pulled out his phone. "Give me your number." She rattled it off, and a moment later her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number, * tomorrow. 7 p.m., I'll send a car. JH *. "A car?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "I'm not letting you take the subway," he replied, voice firm but teasing. "Not for this." Before she could respond, his driver appeared in the doorway, a tall man with sharp eyes who assessed Amina with professional thoroughness before bowing slightly to Jae-Hyun and saying something in Korean. Jae-Hyun responded briefly, then turned back to Amina. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her, wanted him to, if she was being honest with herself. Instead, he caught her hand, bringing it to his lips in a gesture that was somehow both old-fashioned and devastatingly intimate. "Tomorrow," he said quietly against her knuckles. "I promise." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the empty hospital room with her heart racing and the ghost of his touch burning on her skin. Amina changed outfits 4 times before settling on a deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves and made her feel confident and beautiful. Her best friend Maya had practically squealed when Amina told her about the date, immediately launching into a barrage of questions about the mysterious Korean guy from the hospital. "Girl, you're glowing," Maya had said, applying the final touches to Amina's makeup. "I haven't seen you this nervous about a man in forever." "That's because I've never dated a man who might actually be dangerous," Amina had replied, only half joking. Now, sitting in the back of the sleek black car that had arrived exactly at 7, Amina felt her nerves ratcheting up with every block they traveled. The driver, the same man from the hospital, had been perfectly polite but offered no conversation, leaving her alone with her spiraling thoughts. They pulled up to a restaurant she'd never heard of, tucked away on a quiet street in an upscale neighborhood. There was no visible sign, just a discreet door with a small plaque. The driver opened her door and gestured for her to enter. Inside, the restaurant was intimate and elegant, all dark wood and soft lighting. A hostess appeared immediately, greeting her with a warm smile. "Ms. Amina? Please follow me." She was led through the main dining room, about half full of well-dressed couples speaking in hushed tones, to a private room in the back. The hostess slid open a door, and there he was. Jae-Hyun stood as she entered, and her breath caught. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, the top button of his shirt undone in a way that was somehow more attractive than it had any right to be. But it was the look on his face that made her heart skip, warm, appreciative, genuine. "You're beautiful," he said simply, moving forward to greet her. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, accepting his hand as he guided her to her seat. The room was small, intimate, with a low table and comfortable cushions. Traditional Korean, but with modern touches. As soon as she was settled, a server appeared with an array of small dishes. "I hope you don't mind," Jae-Hyun said. "I took the liberty of ordering. But if there's anything you don't like..." "This looks amazing," she interrupted, genuine delight coloring her voice as she surveyed the spread. They fell into easy conversation as they ate, the initial nervousness fading as they discovered shared interests. Both loved old movies. Both were night people who felt most alive when the city was quiet. Both had complicated relationships with their families. "Tell me about them," she said, emboldened by good food and the way he was looking at her. "Your family. The real story, not the version you tell strangers." He was quiet for a moment, considering. Then, "My grandfather built the Park family into what it is today. Started with a small trading company after the war, grew it into an empire. But he wasn't always careful about how he did business or who he did business with." "And your father?" "Made it worse," Jae-Hyun said flatly. "He saw the money and power in the darker side of things and leaned into it. By the time I was old enough to understand what the family really was, we were in too deep to pull out cleanly." "But you're trying," Amina said softly. "To change things." "I'm trying," he agreed. "But people who've built their lives on the way things are don't want change. They see it as a threat. As betrayal." "Is that why you were shot?" He nodded slowly. "A faction within the organization. They wanted to send a message about what happens to reformers." "And yet you're still here," she observed. "Still fighting. Because if I stop, everything my grandfather and father built, the legitimate parts, the good parts, will be consumed by the rot," he said, intensity creeping into his voice. "There are people who depend on our businesses for their livelihoods. Families. Good people who have nothing to do with the illegal side. I owe it to them to try." Amina reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "That's incredibly brave." He turned his hand over, interlacing their fingers. Or incredibly stupid. Maybe both, she said with a small smile. But I think I'm starting to understand why you do it. And what about you? He asked. Why nursing? It can't be easy, the hours, the things you see. Because everyone deserves someone in their corner when they're at their most vulnerable, she said simply. I watched my grandmother die when I was 16. The nurses who cared for her, who held her hand when we couldn't be there, who made sure she wasn't scared, they gave our family an incredible gift. I wanted to be that for someone else. You are, he said quietly, thumb tracing patterns on the back of her hand. You have no idea what you've given me these past few weeks, Amina. Not just the medical care, but the reminder that there's still gentleness in the world. That not everyone operates from a place of violence and calculation. Jae-Hyun. I know this is complicated, he interrupted gently. I know I'm asking you to step into a world that's dangerous and uncertain. But I can't stop thinking about you. Haven't been able to since that first day when you refused to be intimidated by me. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. I can't stop thinking about you either. But I'm scared. Not of you, she added quickly at his expression. But of what loving you might cost. Loving, he repeated, voice rough. She flushed, but didn't look away. Is that really such a surprise? You had to know. He cut her off by leaning across the table and kissing her, soft and searching and sweet. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing with emotion. I'm going to protect you, he said fiercely. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to deal with, you will be safe. I promise you that. I don't need protection, she replied, cupping his face. I need honesty. I need you to let me in, to stop treating this like something you have to handle alone. Can you do that? He was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with something internal. Finally, he nodded. I can try. Then that's enough, she said, and kissed him again. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of food, conversation, and stolen kisses. By the time they left the restaurant, Amina felt like she was floating, all her earlier reservations burned away by the intensity of his attention and the genuine connection between them. In the car, he pulled her close, arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong. Stay with me tonight, he murmured against her hair. She pulled back to look at him. Jae-Hyun. Just to talk, he clarified quickly, though the heat in his eyes suggested talking wasn't all he wanted. I have a place nearby. Private. Safe. I don't want this night to end yet. She should say no. Should maintain boundaries, protect herself. But looking at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes, the careful hope in his expression, she found herself nodding. Okay, but just to talk. His smile was brilliant. Just to talk, he agreed, though they both knew they were lying to themselves. Jae-Hyun's apartment was in a high-rise overlooking the river, all glass and steel and expensive minimalism. It was exactly what she would have expected from him, beautiful, controlled, revealing nothing of the man who lived there. Except for the wall of books in the living room. Amina gravitated to them immediately, running her fingers over the spines. Korean titles mixed with English, philosophy next to fiction, business texts beside poetry. This is the only part of me in this place, Jae-Hyun said from behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. Everything else is just furniture. She turned to face him, finding herself trapped between his body and the bookshelf. Tell me about your favorite. He reached past her, pulling out a worn copy of The Stranger by Camus. My mother gave this to me when I was 15. She said if I was going to inherit the family business, I needed to understand absurdism. That sometimes there's no deeper meaning, no cosmic justice. There's just choice and consequence. Your mother sounds wise, Amina said softly. She was, he replied, and the past tense made her heart ache for him. She died when I was 17. Cancer. It's part of why He gestured vaguely, encompassing his whole complicated life. Why you're trying to change things, Amina finished. She'd be proud of you. I hope so, he murmured, setting the book aside and cupping her face in both hands. Amina, before this goes any further, you need to understand what you're getting into. My life is dangerous. The people who come after me won't hesitate to use you as leverage. Even being here, being seen with me, puts you at risk. I know, she said, covering his hands with hers. And I'm choosing this anyway. I'm choosing you. The kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent, threaded with promise and desperation. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, wrapping her arms around his neck as he lifted her effortlessly. Her legs came around his waist, and he groaned against her mouth. Bedroom, she gasped when they broke apart for air. Are you sure? He asked, searching her face. I've never been more sure of anything, she replied, and it was true. He carried her through the apartment, kissing her the entire way, only breaking contact when he set her down gently on his bed. What followed was tender and intense, a claiming and surrender on both sides, two people choosing each other despite, or perhaps because of, all the danger and complications. Later, as they lay tangled together in his sheets, Amina traced lazy patterns on his chest, careful of the still healing wound on his abdomen. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, he said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, I finish what I started. I clean up the family business, eliminate the threats, and build something we can both live with. We, she repeated, testing the word. We, he confirmed. If you'll have me. For as long as you'll have me, she replied, and settled deeper into his embrace. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and the fragile hope of a future together. Neither of them knew that the danger was far closer than they'd imagined, that their choices that night had already set in motion events neither could control. The next morning, Amina woke to an empty bed and the sound of angry voices from another room. She pulled on Jae-Hyun's shirt and padded quietly toward the sound, stopping just outside his study when she recognized the voice of one of the men from the hospital. Can't keep this up, Hyungnim. Chairman Park knows about the girl. He's already making moves. Let him try. Jae-Hyun's voice was cold, deadly. If he touches her, if any of them so much as look at her wrong, I'll burn the whole organization to the ground. That's exactly what they're counting on. The other man, his name was Min-jun, she learned, argued. They think she's your weakness. They'll use her to control you or force you out. You have to end this before. I'm not ending anything, Jae-Hyun interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. She's not a piece on their chessboard. She's mine to protect, and I will. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then, Jae-Hyun said firmly. There was a long silence, then Min-jun sighed. Then we need to accelerate the timeline. Move against them before they move against her. Agreed. Set up a meeting with the Seoul faction. All of them. It's time to force their hand. Amina's heart was racing. She should retreat, pretend she hadn't heard any of this. Instead, she stepped into the doorway. When were you going to tell me? She asked quietly. Both men spun to face her. Min-jun looked shocked, but Jae-Hyun's expression was carefully neutral, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. Amina. Don't, she interrupted. I heard enough. Your grandfather knows about me. He's making moves. You're planning some kind of confrontation. Jae-Hyun exchanged a glance with Min-jun, who took the hint and left, closing the door behind him. Once they were alone, Jae-Hyun crossed to her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. You promised honesty, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Last night, you promised to let me in. So do it. Tell me what's really happening. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and guilt warring on his face. After I was shot, I started making moves to consolidate power within the organization, forcing out the most corrupt elements, cutting ties with illegal operations. My grandfather, Chairman Park, he's the one who ordered the hit on me. Not directly, but he sanctioned it. A warning about getting too ambitious. Amina felt the air leave her lungs. Your own grandfather tried to kill you? In his mind, he was disciplining me, reminding me of my place in the hierarchy. Jae-Hyun's voice was bitter. But it backfired. Instead of falling in line, I started moving against him, quietly gathering support from the younger members, the ones who see the writing on the wall. We're planning a restructuring. A coup, essentially. And now he knows about me, Amina said, understanding dawning. So I'm leverage. You're a target, Jae-Hyun corrected grimly. Which is why I need you to trust me. I have a safe house prepared. Security. Everything you need. You'll stay there until this is over. Absolutely not, she said immediately. His jaw tightened. Amina. No. I'm not going to hide while you walk into whatever dangerous situation you're planning. She moved closer, gripping his arms. If we're doing this, if we're together, then we're in it together. You don't get to lock me away like some damsel in distress. You don't understand what these people are capable of. Then explain it to me, she demanded, voice rising. Stop trying to protect me by keeping me in the dark. I'm a grown woman who made a choice. Respect that choice, Jae-Hyun. He stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Finally, he nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. His voice caught. I can't lose you. Not when I've just found you. She softened, cupping his face. You won't. But you have to trust me to be strong enough to stand beside you. I do trust you, he said, covering her hands with his. It's everyone else I don't trust. So tell me the plan. All of it. Over the next hour, Jae-Hyun laid out everything. His grandfather, Chairman Park Sung-min, had built the Park family empire through a combination of legitimate business and organized crime. What had started as necessary survival in post-war Korea had calcified into a system that enriched a few while exploiting many. Jae-Hyun's father had been the enforcer, the muscle behind his grandfather's vision. But Jae-Hyun's mother had planted different seeds, ideas about responsibility, about using power to protect rather than exploit. When she died, Jae-Hyun had been forced to step into his father's role, but he'd never forgotten her lessons. The organization is fracturing, Jae-Hyun explained, showing her a complex diagram on his tablet. There are 3 main factions. The old guard, loyal to my grandfather, who want things to stay as they are. The moderates, who see the need for change but are afraid to act. And my faction, mostly younger members who want to legitimize everything, even if it means short-term losses. And the person who shot you? Amina asked. A hired gun, working for someone in the old guard. We still don't know who exactly ordered it, but the message was clear: back off or face consequences. But you didn't back off. I couldn't. Not when I'd already started down this path. He set the tablet aside and took her hands. The meeting I'm setting up will force everyone to choose. My grandfather will be there. The faction leaders. Everyone with real power. I'm going to present them with an ultimatum. Accept the restructuring, or I'll expose everything. The illegal operations, the bribes, the connections to organized crime. All of it. That's incredibly dangerous, Amina breathed. They could kill you right there. That's why Minjun and others will be positioned throughout the venue. Armed. Ready to extract me if things go wrong. It's also why I need you somewhere safe. If they can't use you against me, they lose their best leverage. Amina was quiet, processing. When is this meeting? 3 days from now. Friday night. And after? If it works, then we rebuild. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. But we'll have a foundation. Something clean we can build a life on. The weight of what he was asking, what they were both risking, settled over them. Amina moved into his arms, and he held her tight, both of them taking comfort in the moment. I'll go to the safe house, she said finally. But I want updates. Every hour. And if something goes wrong. It won't, he promised, though they both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. The safe house was a modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood, nothing like Jae-Hyun's sleek high-rise. Minjun personally drove her there, 2 other security personnel following in a second car. He cares about you very much, Minjun said as they drove. I've known Jae-Hyun since we were teenagers. I've never seen him like this with anyone. I care about him too, Amina replied, staring out the window. That's why this is so hard. He'll come back to you, Minjun said confidently. He's too stubborn not to. The apartment was comfortable, fully stocked kitchen, secure communications equipment, books, and entertainment to pass the time. But it felt like a cage, no matter how comfortable. Amina tried to keep busy, but every hour that passed felt like an eternity. True to his word, Jae-Hyun sent updates. Short messages, but consistent. Preparations underway. Miss you already. JH. Meeting confirmed for Friday, 8 p.m. Counting the hours until I can see you again. JH. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about you in my shirt. Soon, Sarung. JH. That last message made her smile despite her anxiety. She learned that sarung, darling. Such a simple word, but it carried so much weight. On Thursday, the messages became more sparse. She tried not to panic, told herself he was just busy with final preparations. But as evening fell with no word, her anxiety spiked. Finally, at 11 p.m., her phone rang. Jae-Hyun's voice was tense. There's been a complication. My grandfather moved the meeting up. It's happening tomorrow afternoon instead. What? Why? I don't know. Maybe he suspects something. Maybe he's trying to throw me off balance. Either way, we have less time to prepare. Jae-Hyun. I know. I know you're scared. I am too, if I'm being honest. But Amina, I need you to promise me something. Anything. If something happens to me, if this goes wrong, you take the documents in the safe here, Minjun knows where they are, and you go to the prosecutor I've been working with. Her name is Prosecutor Kim Ji-won. Promise me. Don't talk like that. Promise me, Amina. Please. She was crying now, hot tears streaming down her face. I promise. But you're coming back to me, do you understand? You promised. I promised, he echoed, voice rough with emotion. I love you. I should have said it before, but I was afraid if I said it out loud, I'd make it real, and real things can be taken away. But I don't care anymore. I love you, Amina. Whatever happens tomorrow, know that. I love you too, she whispered. Come back to me. Always, he promised. The line went dead, and Amina was left alone with her fear and the weight of words that might be their last. Friday afternoon arrived with agonizing slowness. Amina spent the morning pacing, checking her phone obsessively, jumping at every sound. Minjun had left hours ago, joining Jae-Hyun for final preparations. She was alone except for one security guard stationed outside. At 2 p.m., she received a message. Heading in. We'll contact you when it's done. Stay safe. JH. The hours crawled by. 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m., no word. At 5:30 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. Ms. Amina? A woman's voice, speaking English with a Korean accent. My name is Prosecutor Kim Ji-won. Jae-Hyun gave me your number. There's been an incident. Amina's heart stopped. What kind of incident? There was gunfire at the meeting location. Multiple casualties. Jae-Hyun is. She paused. He's missing. We have teams searching, but I need you to stay where you are. It's not safe. Where is the meeting location? Amina demanded, already grabbing her coat. Ms. Amina, you can't. Where is it? The prosecutor sighed, recognizing a losing battle. She gave the address, a warehouse in the industrial district. But please, wait for police escort. Amina hung up and ran. She made it 3 blocks before the security guard caught up with her, practically carrying her back toward the safe house. She fought him, screaming, until a black van screeched to a halt beside them. The door opened, revealing Minjun, blood on his shirt, desperation in his eyes. Get in, he barked. If you're going, we're going together. We don't have much time. She didn't hesitate, jumping into the van. 2 other men she recognized from Jae-Hyun's security team were inside, all armed, all looking grim. What happened? She demanded as they peeled away. Ambush, Minjun said shortly, checking his weapon. Chairman Park had no intention of negotiating. He brought twice as many men as agreed. When Jae-Hyun presented the evidence, the old man gave the order to eliminate everyone in the room. But Jae-Hyun got out. I saw him take 3 bullets, best caught 2, but 1 went through. He was still moving when we got separated. We've been searching for the last 2 hours, but the warehouse district is massive, and they have men everywhere hunting for him. Amina felt like she couldn't breathe. He's bleeding. He'll need medical attention. Which is why we're bringing you, Minjun said, meeting her eyes. He won't go to a hospital. Too exposed. But if we can find him, you can stabilize him until we get somewhere safe. The van careened through streets, Minjun coordinating with other teams via earpiece. They approached the warehouse district from the south, avoiding the main routes where Chairman Park's men would be watching. Here, Minjun said, as they turned into a narrow alley. This is where we lost track of him. He was heading east, probably trying to reach one of our safe locations. They split up, Minjun staying close to Amina while the others fanned out. The area was industrial, full of shadows and echoing sounds that could be footsteps or just wind. Then she heard it, a cough, wet and painful, from a recessed doorway ahead. Jae-Hyun, she called, running before Minjun could stop her. He was slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. His face was pale, lips tinged blue, but his eyes focused when he heard her voice. "You're supposed to be at the safe house," he rasped, managing a weak smile even as he coughed up blood. "And you're supposed to be bulletproof," she shot back, already assessing his injuries with practiced hands. "Minjun, I need the medical kit. Now." But even as Minjun moved to comply, sounds echoed from the far end of the alley, shouts, running feet. Chairman Park's men had found them. "Go," Jae-Hyun urged, trying to push her away. "Get her out of here, Minjun." "Not a chance," Amina said firmly, pressing harder on his wound. "We all leave together or none of us do." "There's too many of them," Minjun said, positioning himself between them and the approaching threat, weapon drawn. "We need extraction. Now." One of the other security team members spoke rapidly into his radio while the second took up a defensive position. The footsteps were getting closer, and Amina could see shadows moving at the alley's entrance. "Amina," Jae-Hyun said, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me. In my left pocket. Flash drive. Everything we need to bring them down. Get it to Prosecutor Kim. Promise me." "Stop talking like you're dying," she hissed, but she reached into his pocket, finding the small device and shoving it deep into her own pocket. "You're going to deliver it yourself." The first shots rang out, deafening in the narrow space. Minjun returned fire, his team doing the same. Amina threw herself over Jae-Hyun, shielding him with her body as bullets ricocheted off brick and concrete. "Amina, no." Jae-Hyun tried to pull her down beside him instead, but he was too weak. "Extraction in 2 minutes," someone shouted over the chaos. 2 minutes. They had to survive for 2 minutes. Minjun's weapon clicked empty. He smoothly transitioned to a backup piece, never breaking his defensive position. "How's he doing?" he called back. "Not good," Amina replied honestly, hands slick with blood as she tried to keep pressure on the wound. "He needs a hospital. Real surgery." "Working on it," Minjun grunted, taking down another attacker. Then, through the smoke and chaos, a new figure appeared at the alley entrance. Older, distinguished, radiating cold authority. Chairman Park. "Enough," he said, voice cutting through the gunfire. His men stopped shooting, though they kept weapons raised. "Jae-Hyun, this is what defiance gets you. Pain. Death. Loss." "Grandfather," Jae-Hyun's voice was weak but defiant. "This is what corruption gets you. The end of everything you built." "I built an empire." "You built a prison," Jae-Hyun interrupted, coughing. "And I'm tearing it down." Chairman Park's expression hardened. "Then you'll die in its rubble. Along with her." His cold gaze fixed on Amina. "Such a waste. But necessary." He raised his hand, and Amina knew he was about to give the order. She closed her eyes, holding Jae-Hyun tighter, refusing to let go even in death. The sound that came next wasn't gunfire, it was sirens. Lots of them. And shouts from bullhorns, "Police. Drop your weapons." Prosecutor Kim had arrived with half the precinct. Chairman Park's face twisted in rage and disbelief. "You called the police? To a family matter." "It stopped being family when you tried to kill me," Jae-Hyun said, each word an effort. "The flash drive, it's copies. Real ones already, with Prosecutor Kim. You're done." For a moment, Amina thought Chairman Park might order his men to shoot anyway, consequences be damned. But then police flooded the alley from both ends, and the moment passed. The old man's shoulders sagged, decades of power and authority draining away as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. "You've destroyed everything," he said to Jae-Hyun, voice hollow. "No," Jae-Hyun replied, blood on his lips but triumph in his eyes. "I saved it." Paramedics rushed in, prying Amina's hands away from Jae-Hyun's wound so they could work. She wanted to fight them, to stay with him, but Minjun gently pulled her back. "Let them work," he said quietly. "You've done everything you can." She watched, numb with shock and terror, as they loaded Jae-Hyun onto a stretcher. His hand reached out, searching, and she grabbed it without thinking. "I'm here," she said, voice breaking. "I'm right here." "Don't leave," he whispered, eyes struggling to focus. "Never," she promised, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The ambulance ride was chaos, EMTs working frantically, machines beeping, Jae-Hyun's vital signs dangerously unstable. Amina held his hand the entire time, murmuring reassurances she wasn't sure he could hear, praying to every deity she could think of. They rushed him into emergency surgery the moment they arrived at Seoul Medical Center, a different hospital than St. Clair's, but the controlled chaos was familiar. A nurse tried to make Amina wait in the family area, but she pulled out her nursing credentials. "I'm his nurse," she said firmly. "And I'm not leaving him." The nurse looked at her blood-soaked clothes, her tear-streaked face, and made a judgment call. "Fine. But you stay out of the way and follow all protocols." Amina nodded, scrubbing in with shaking hands. The surgery took 6 hours. 6 hours of watching skilled hands work to repair damage, to stem bleeding, to save the man she loved. When it was finally over, when the surgeon stepped back and said, "He'll make it," Amina's legs gave out. Someone caught her, Minjun, who'd been waiting just outside the OR, refusing to leave. "He's going to be okay," she told him, laughing and crying at the same time. "He's going to be okay." Hyun remained unconscious, his body healing from the trauma. Amina barely left his side, sleeping in the chair beside his bed, eating only when Minjun or Prosecutor Kim forced food on her. The prosecutor visited often, updating them on the case. Chairman Park and 17 others had been arrested. The evidence on the flash drive was damning: decades of illegal activity, corruption, violence. The trial would be massive, but the outcome was certain. "You did it," Prosecutor Kim told the sleeping Jae-Hyun during one visit. "You brought them down." "He almost died doing it," Amina said quietly, not looking away from his face. "I know," the prosecutor replied. "But he chose this. He chose to fight for something better. That takes incredible courage." On the third day, Jae-Hyun's eyes finally opened. Amina was dozing in her chair, head resting on the edge of his bed, when she felt fingers gently threading through her hair. "You stayed," he said, voice rough from disuse. She jerked awake, fresh tears spilling over at the sight of him, conscious and aware. "You promised you'd come back to me," she said, gripping his hand like a lifeline. "I was just making sure you kept that promise." "Always," he replied, the word coming easier now. "Though this wasn't exactly how I planned our reunion. You got shot." "Again," she said, somewhere between laughing and crying. "Do you have any idea how terrifying it is loving someone who keeps getting shot?" "Loving," he repeated, a smile tugging at his lips despite the pain. "Yes, loving you, impossible man. I love you, even though you're reckless and stubborn and have the worst timing." He pulled her closer, cutting off her rant with a kiss that was gentle but no less intense for it. "I love you too," he murmured against her lips. "Thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," she promised, echoing his word from days before. The road to recovery was long. Physical therapy for Jae-Hyun's injuries. Testimony for the trials. Restructuring the legitimate parts of the Park business empire while cutting away the rot. But through it all, they had each other. Amina took a leave of absence from St. Clair's, eventually transferring to Seoul Medical Center to be closer to Jae-Hyun during his recovery. They moved in together, not to his sterile high-rise, but to a new place they chose together, a home rather than just an apartment. Minjun became a permanent fixture in their lives, head of security for the New Park Corporation and one of their closest friends. He'd been the one to coordinate with Prosecutor Kim to make sure help arrived when they needed it most. Jae-Hyun trusted him with his life and, more importantly, with Amina's life. The trials were grueling. Jae-Hyun testified against his own grandfather, laying bare decades of crimes. It was painful, a final severing of family ties, but necessary. When Chairman Park was finally sentenced 20 years, with no possibility of parole, Jae-Hyun squeezed Amina's hand and whispered, "It's finally over." "No," she corrected gently. "It's finally beginning." The rooftop garden was Amina's idea. She'd wanted green space, somewhere they could breathe after months of confined healing. Jae-Hyun had it built in weeks, not because he could throw money at problems, but because he understood what she needed. They stood there now, overlooking the city as the sun set, painting Seoul in shades of gold and amber. Jae-Hyun's arms were around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder, and for the first time in months, everything felt peaceful. "I have something for you," he said, pulling back slightly. "If it's another expensive gift," she started, but stopped when she saw what he was holding. A small velvet box. Her heart stopped, then began racing double time. "Amina," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring beautiful in its simplicity, a single diamond that caught the fading light. "You stayed when anyone else would have run. You saw the worst of me, the most dangerous parts of my world, and you chose to stay anyway. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." He got down on one knee, and she realized she was crying. "I can't promise you easy. My world, even cleaned up, will never be simple. But I can promise you that every day, for the rest of my life, I will choose you. I will protect you. I will love you with everything I am." He paused, eyes bright with emotion. "Marry me. Build this new life with me. Let me spend forever making you as happy as you've made me." "Yes," she said, not hesitating for even a second. "Yes, 1,000 times yes."
You've made me the happiest.
He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then stood and kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. She kissed him back with equal fervor, pouring 6 months of fear and hope and love into it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and grinning, Jae-Hyun pressed his forehead to hers. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For saving me. In every way a person can be saved." "You saved yourself," she corrected, cupping his face. "I just reminded you why it was worth fighting for." "You're everything worth fighting for," he replied. As the sun finished setting and Seoul lit up around them, they stood wrapped in each other, two people who had found their way through darkness to this moment of light and promise. The journey had been dangerous, painful, nearly fatal. But standing there, ring glinting on her finger and his heart beating steady and strong against her palm, Amina knew with absolute certainty that she would choose him again. Every time. In every life. "I love you," she said, simple and true. "I love you," he replied, and kissed her again as the city sparkled below them. They had fought for this, for each other, for the chance at happiness, for the right to choose their own path. And in the end, love had been stronger than violence, trust stronger than fear, hope stronger than despair. This was their beginning. Their real beginning. And it was beautiful. Like and subscribe for more videos.